Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Beyond the Box. Tonight, I have Dennis Carroll with us. Most of you know who he is. He's an author. He runs his own channel, Hunting the Shadows, and an altogether good guy. And tonight, we've got some interesting topics we're going to talk about. So, let me go ahead and bring him in. See, my other cohorts are not here yet. Everybody runs late. Anyhow, hi there, Dennis.
Oh, Brenda's going to be a kind of a cryptid night tonight. Okay.
You
remember Vampire Weekend? This is Cryptid Weekend. Okay.
That's right. I can do that.
Yeah, we're going to talk. We'll talk some cryptid tonight, and I'm a monster hunter from way back. When I started this stuff, when I got into all this stuff, and I was telling somebody this the other day, and I started at the very ripe old age of about 14 years old. The very first absolute case that I had that I actually went out and investigated on was a werewolf sighting. So I got started on that. A lot of people think I'm more like a spiritual research guy, which I've done that for a long time. I've had a lot of experience with that. Done it for many, many years. I've done a lot of what people I call it spiritual research. A lot of people like to call it ghost hunting. But but I've always been in cryptids too. I love monsters. I was a monster kid.
Right.
Way back. I loved monster movies. I remember my teacher's second grade teacher getting on to me for watching horror movies.
Yeah. I know that feeling.
And she asked me, said, doesn't that not scare you and give you nightmares? I said, no. Yep. I know even as a little kid that they're not real, but guess what? Here's what I'm going to put on the back of my next book. When you're a kid, you think that monsters are real. Then you grow up to find out they really are.
Yeah. Yep.
And here's the bad part about it, though. I've also found out they can be us, too.
Yep. They sure can. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes I even think humans are worse monsters than the ones I grew up watching or believing in.
Oh, yeah, they can be that. Believe me, I have, as a former law enforcement, I can very well vouch for that because I've run into a lot of them like that, but that is the human evil. Yes. That's out there. And, you and I, we've done some shows in the past about that inhuman evil that stands behind human evil, demonical type stuff that we've talked about before. Yes. But, it's definitely there. And, but, that's what I was telling somebody the other day. We humans can be diabolical enough without help. But we get it nevertheless. We get help whether we want it or not sometimes.
That's right. So tonight, what do you want to start with? Do you want to start with some of the cryptids, or you did mention the zombies? We can talk about that first.
Yeah, well, we'll get to the zombies. Maybe we'll save them for the icing on the cake, okay?
Okay.
Let me address Bigfoot right quick because I'm a big believer in Bigfoot. Matter of
fact, yeah.
Hunted him for years until I met him face to face. And several times I saw him at a distance. And that was my goal, was to get a close-up look at him, which eventually I finally did. And it was very life-changing thing for me when I did that. And actually, he and I was close enough to touch him. I could have reached out and touched him. That's how close I was. And I never will forget. I was thinking about it the other day. I never will forget the surprised look on his face. I don't know what I look like. I probably had something got kind of look on my face too, but the surprised look on his face was, it was like, I'm not going to say it was really real animated surprise, but it was like kind of a shock. Like, you can see me or you see me kind of thing, And a lot of people asked me after that, said, well, Dennis, didn't you want to turn tail and run? I said, yeah, I wanted to run towards him. I wanted to see more of him.
Right?
He left too quickly for me. It was over, I couldn't appreciate it the way I wanted to, but it was very, but here's the thing that came home to me, Britain, and And it haunted me for a long time after that. And this is the question: when you do finally see something like it, and we're human beings, seeing is believing for us. Okay,
Right.
talk about
Yes.
it all day long till the cows come home. Okay, but when you see it, that changes everything. For you, okay, and I know what I saw, and I know what I experienced. I was not drinking. I was not on drugs. I don't have a mental problem. I saw what I saw. What I saw, and it was so late to deny it. Uh, but the one thing that came home to me was the fact that if this is real, then my God, what else is out
Yeah.
there? So therefore, that lit a bigger fire under me to keep looking for what else is out there. And along with Bigfoot, and like I say, that's all the whole question for me. Yes, he's real. He's real. I can tell you that because I saw him, and he and I met for just a while there. Eye to eye contact. It was really strange. And I'll describe him for you right quick before I move on here, man. He was humongous. I mean, he was big. I mean, he was well over 8 foot at least. Because I went back later and measured. He was right next to a very big oak tree. And I measured one of the limbs. And I remember when I saw him, how far his head was from the top of the head was to that limb. And I went back and I went and got a ladder and come back, and I measured that exactly, and it was like 8 foot 6 inches, something like that. And that I don't, where I come from, that's a giant, my friend. Okay, that's big. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not a skunk ape that you hear about. You hear a lot about the skunk apes in the South, and all. No, this was not a skunk ape. I don't think this was the real thing. But here's the interesting thing about it: he was muscular, but not like a Arnold Schwarzenegger was once upon a time. But he was sort of like that, wild animal kind of muscular type thing about him. And he had long hair. And he doesn't. I'm gonna tell you this about him. He does not look like an ape to a certain extent.
Right.
You see Bigfoot depicted, statues and all. It looks like a monkey. Okay, it looks like a big gorilla or something. Yeah. He did not look like that. But he had some features that go to that. But I'm just saying that's not what he looked like. He looked more human. If I had him, and I've told people this before, if I had him in the crosshairs of a rifle, I would think two or
It
three
was a
times before
person.
I would do that. I would take him out because he looked too darn human in many aspects. I could see some of his face, but his hair was long on his face, like a beard, but the beard was not like a man's beard. It went further up under his eyes, like, and around this way, and the hair was long. And then, of course, he had hair all over, but the hair on him was not that long. It might have been maybe 2.5 inches, 2 inches, somewhere in there. And it was sort of a reddish cinnamon, not real light, but sort of dark cinnamon color. That's the only way I can describe it. And that's all I could catch in that moment. I could smell him very clearly. I could smell him. I could feel the heat off his body. I was that close to him. Like I said, I could have reached out and slapped him if I wanted to, but I would not advise that.
Oh no,
I know.
no. Because that would have been like, you're here to harm me. I'm just gonna stomp you in the ground. You don't want to do
Well,
that.
I kind of got the feeling from that. And here's the thing that I come away with, and this is just the afterthought of it. I didn't pick up on it till or think about it that much at the moment that it was happening. But I got a kind of dark feeling about him, as if like, yeah, he belonged here, but yet he didn't belong here,
Hmm.
kind of a thing. It was um, it was kind of weird. But I formulated, a lot of theories, and we'll talk about that sometime on another show. It'll be another show. More like he's related, I think, without a doubt, to the Nephilim, and somehow.
Right.
But I got that feeling that yeah, but he belonged here, but yet he didn't belong, and yet I feel like he has some kind of a spiritual nature to him as well. You
Oh,
know,
I believe they
and I'm
do.
not saying he was a ghost or a spirit. I'm just saying there
Right.
was sort of I picked up on sort of that spiritual type feeling to it. That's what I came away with.
Like an
Dog,
energy.
yeah, yeah. But now Dog Man he would be and think I have spotted Dog Man. Now I'm gonna tell you a quick story of what happened to me. This has been many years ago, and we were in the mountains of North Carolina and Cherokee. Matter of fact, I had two Cherokee friends with me. They were excellent trackers. I mean, these guys could track anything. And I always believe in tracking because that's very, very important when you go out. You got to know your tracks and what you're dealing with and all that stuff. Well, anyway, we had been all day long. We'd been through most all of that day, through a lot of mountain terrain. We were looking for the wampus cat. And I know
Oh,
you've heard of the wampus cat. And of
yes.
course, now let me tell everybody that might not be familiar with that. The wampus cat is like a huge mountain lion with 6 legs, supposedly. Okay. Now we weren't getting any tracks on that. Okay. I'll stop and explain this a moment. We were not getting the 6-legged cat tracks out there. Okay. We were not getting any tracks that was like I said, it's very important that you track, and we weren't getting any tracks. And that was what was frustrating us. We weren't picking up. There was something ahead of us, but we didn't know what it was. Anyway, this stuff went on for quite a while, and it started to get dark. Not dark yet, twilight, just before twilight. I'd say maybe 30 minutes before twilight sets in, so about an hour before dark. Okay, we're still out there doing this thing, and just as before twilight starts failing, we start picking up some tracks along a creek bed, well, next to a creek. And as we're going along the tracks, the two Cherokee guys are talking to each other. And I'm not paying a whole lot of attention to them. I'm looking at the tracks too, And here's what the tracks look like. And I said, wait a minute, these are not cat tracks that we got here. And that's what they said. Yeah, we know. And I said, these look like dog tracks, but they don't look like. They kind of look like dog tracks, but they're not dog tracks either. Okay. Now, about that time, further off a little ways down into the hollow down in there, or as we say in the South, a holler, down in the holler down in there, something stood up in the bushes. And I could not see it. It was dark down in there. Okay. People don't realize when you're out in the middle of nowhere like that, there are no lights, folks. Okay, it is dark. Okay, something stood up down in there, and it had the silhouette I could see of it. Okay, against the skyline, like it had. And a lot of people said later, Dennis, you probably spotted a skinny bear or something. I said, no, it was not the bear. It was not a bear because I've run into bears a whole lot. I've had close-up encounters with a lot of bears. I think one or two of them thought I was their daddy or something. But anyway, it stood up, and the silhouette, it had pointed ears. It had a muzzle and pointed. I said, all I can tell you now, and a lot of people said, was it dog? I said, I really can't tell you 100% it was. Okay?
Right.
But now here's the weird thing, and that had to happen a little bit before we ran into these tracks on the creek. Okay? All right. They start looking at these tracks and they start talking to each other. And I'm not listening because I'm looking at him and I said, what'd you say? And he said, look, we're stopping here. This is as far as we're going. We're leaving. And I look at him and I said, why are we leaving? We got some hot tracks now, I said, but they're weird. I said, it started out back here 4 legs. And now further down the creek, it's walking on 2 legs. So one of the Cherokee guys says to the other one, they say something in the Cherokee language.
Right.
And the other one said that, and I said, what did he say? He said, look, we didn't sign on to track no damn werewolf.
Right.
We're leaving. Bye. And I said, well, okay, I'm going with you.
Wait for me.
He said those tracks started out on 4 legs. Now they're 2, and they're big dog. Like, what do you expect to think? That's a werewolf.
Yeah.
I said, okay, well, that's what we're looking. And after having seen that, what I saw, I put 2 and 2 together. Of course, I said maybe that's what it was.
Right. Could have been werewolf, dog. Well, I think that werewolf and dog man are kind of close and similar. Yeah. They kind of look alike.
Well, I think a lot of times, and people have argued with me about this because you got 2 camps in cryptozoology about this. But I think a lot of times they get confused on this. You know, nobody's going to walk up and say, let me see your werewolf card or let me see your dogman card. What are you? I think a lot of times people misidentify what they are actually seeing. But let me say this for the record, and having studied all this and that I know and what werewolves truly are. And we won't get into that now, like that's a show for another time too. But werewolves are very demonical. They're very diabolical things. And that's where they get their power, their strength, and all that. That's where they're coming from. That's their base. Let me tell you this. Dogman may cut you a break, and you will live to tell about it. But if you ever run into a real werewolf, you will probably not live to tell the story. Matter of fact, I put that out today on my Facebook. I said the one thing about the werewolf is there's not that many true werewolf reports because people do not live long enough to give them.
Yeah.
And that's what the werewolf will do to you. If you walk away from a real werewolf encounter, then God's really looking out for you. That's all I can say. You know?
My dog has a bad case of the barkies.
Well, he's got an opinion too. So
He does.
He
doesn't like, you know what? My dog likes everybody, but he does not like my neighbor. And when my neighbor is outside smoking a cigar, he goes crazy.
Neighbor's not doing dumb, probably.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, that's the thing about it. And here's something else, though, and I've been doing some research on this, and this is going to blow your mind when you think about it. Actually, I'm going to tell you something. I had a report the other day. There's a thing about dogmen. I want to say this. I'm not going to say all dogmen now. I don't like to paint anything with a broad brush, okay? That's not a good idea to do. But I'm getting some feedback, especially with my good friend BMR, Bigfoot Michigan Rob. He put out a good book on this, a lot of these sightings, and some weird stuff with the dogman thing is going on. I think sometimes, Brenda, some of these dogman things may be attached to some type of conjuring going on.
Yes, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that.
And you know what? I got a report the other day, and this guy was telling me, and he was sort of in the same situation I was telling you about with the Wampus guy. Said he was out walking his dog. And, you know, he's down in the park or in a woods next to a park. And he goes down, and the dog goes off in the woods a little bit, and it's still on a leash. You know how you let that long leash, that automatic leash thing, And his dog kind of went on and let it go down in the woods a little bit. And thought he was going to do his job, I guess, out there or whatever. And the dog still was staying out there looking at something. You know, the dog, he said, was like staring at something. He said, so he stepped on into the woods a little bit. Where the dog was, and he started winding the leash back in, on the dog, getting the dog to come back. He said he heard something, and he sounded like chanting.
Oh.
So he kind of goes over to like a little ridge and looks down and sort of like there's a holler again, okay? Like down in a hollow place down in there. And he said, and it's dark by now, it's pretty dark, and he said, honest to God, Dr. Carroll said it looked like dogmen or something. And he said, but I couldn't see them clear, But I hear chanting and there was they were gathered in a circle And he said there was a pattern laid out on the ground. But anyway, he said he went back later a couple of days. He got the heck out of there. He got to get out of Dodge real quick, and I don't blame him. That was a good idea. If you ever run up on something like that, you better
walk
just
the other way.
Yeah. And he said he went back, and he said some of that pattern was still on the ground, and it was like a pentagram, was made with limbs from tree limbs. And I said, well, what did they look like, werewolves or dogmen, or there is a slight difference. There are some slight differences in there. He said, he said, it looked like dogmen. He said, I don't know what they were, but I just wanted to get out of there. But that was very strange. What was the chanting on? Was it a werewolf cult, a coven of werewolves, is what you might say? Or was it a bunch of dogmen? That's very strange.
Very strange. I think that, like with werewolves, because of the fact that they change, so I think they have some human aspects, but with the dogman, I really can't believe that they are conjured up by some kind of demonic thing going on,
Black,
witches,
yeah,
something.
yeah, black witchcraft or magic.
Yeah,
Well, there are a lot of cases in black magic and the occult where certain things can be brought over for certain purposes. Uh, Let me tell you this. This is an interesting thing to think about. Sometimes, even those that who become werewolves are sent out by certain covens or cults to assassinate people or take out even other. There's a lot of rivalry between cults. Okay, or you might call it gang warfare, folks, in that
yeah.
respect. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. Sometimes they get into it. They have, even evil has disagreements sometimes, my friends. Anyway, sometimes they can, send out to take care of an enemy that they want to get rid of, whatever the situation may be, or maybe somebody, just maybe a bad boss on the job, or whatever the situation is. They will send out something to handle the problem. And I think sometimes it can be something that's very similar to a dog man, if it's not actually a dog man thing. But here's the thing we got to remember about the dog man, according to what we supposedly know about it, and it's not a whole lot that we know about it. But he is dog man 24/7. The werewolf could be your next door neighbor, like the dog's barking at.
Right.
It could be somebody you know. They can change voluntarily, and by the way, they don't need the full moon to change. They don't need the full moon. They can do that anytime they want, even in broad daylight. It doesn't have to, but they are creatures of darkness, and they're the height of their power at the full moon and in the darkness. That's the height of their power. The same thing with the vampire. It's very similar to that. Anyways, they're much better in their darkness because that's where they come from. That's what they're made of. Um, but he puts on the belt, he does the spells, he or she, and there are some women werewolves, folks. Yes, yes, there, absolutely. There are families of werewolves, and there are many different types of werewolves. You could almost write a book on just the different types of werewolves they are. But there are cursed people, there are cursed families, cursed bloodlines that have
Right.
the werewolf factor in them as well. But and those people are the saddest. That's the ones I really feel for. But now the werewolf wants to be that way. He has given himself over to that diabolical darkness completely. And that's how you lose your soul. That's how you sell your soul. You sell your soul to the darkness. Okay, it's not like a commodity. You can go pick up a package of souls at Walmart. It's not. They don't work that way, folks. You got to sell out to the darkness, and that means you completely surrender to it and become part of it. That's when you lose your soul and your humanity. Dogman, on the other hand, if he is what he is, we think he is a lot of times. And I'm not going to get into what maybe the government has done to them tonight. That's another interesting factor.
Right.
But yeah, but if he is in his natural state, it would be more like Bigfoot in many ways. But and I can see him maybe cutting you a break, you know. But the werewolf would not. The werewolf, you're not going to walk away from that. If you survive it, then God's really looking out for you. You know, if you were, you're very, very incredibly lucky because it is a psychotic killer. Once it gets on your trail, once it picks your scent up, and I do mean that literally, folks. Once it picks your scent, it will not stop till it tears you into pieces and eats you up. And if
Yeah.
you get one of those on your trail, and that makes, by the way, one of the most perfect assassins you could ever want.
Right.
You stick something like that on somebody, you're gonna probably get the job done.
Kind of makes me wonder what the government would think of that.
Well, and let me tell you something else that'll blow your mind. You ever heard of the Hounds of God?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people forget about them. That is a secret sect of the church that are werewolves. And they're supposedly doing the work of God, which I don't believe that. You don't use evil to do good, folks.
Right.
Okay, don't believe that. That's a twisted, messed up thing here. Okay, you don't use evil to do good, and the werewolf is basically evil. You are not going to have a good werewolf because
Right.
they have already been swallowed up by that darkness. And they're not, I'm sorry, a lot of people. Here's the bad thing about this, Brendan. And we're bad about doing this to our dogs and other pets and all that. We try to humanize everything. But you cannot humanize werewolves. You can't humanize Dogman. You can't humanize Bigfoot. You can't humanize a monster because if you try to humanize him, he's no longer a monster.
Well, that's like, most like people who find bear cubs and they raise them and they try to make them a pet.
Yeah.
Eventually, they're going to get that wild instinct back,
Yeah. And I see these things on Facebook. I know you have too, but people have got the panthers and they got, mountain lions and they got deer living with them and all that. That is not good to do. So they are wild animals. They need to be in the wild.
I have an uncle that has a bobcat that he found as a kitten and thought it was a regular cat. And now she's big, she's beautiful. But I tell him, well, where does she sleep? And he said, anywhere she wants to.
Well, it's kind of like that joke about the nearsighted woman that found the puppy and later on it turned out to be a coyote. But anyway.
Yeah.
You might get fooled about that. I think one of the joke too was a raccoon, which can be hard to do that one. But anyway, I ran into a pack of wild raccoons one day out in the woods. They can be vicious little suckers, man.
Oh, yes.
Well, yeah.
And if you feed them, they take it back to their family, and then they bring their whole entire family.
Oh, yeah.
Come and get food.
Yeah.
And they don't take, I'm all out of food for an answer.
Hey, folks, they got free food over here.
Yeah. Yes.
But you cannot humanize the monster because that's there's a good one and there's a bad one. They're not moving along lines of good and morality like we're thinking about a lot of times. And I've had a lot of people tell me this, and here's a dangerous aspect, Brenda. Oh, Dogman spoke to my mind, or Bigfoot, connected, communicating. I said, oh, no, I don't like to hear that. Anything. I'm going to tell you this, folks. Everybody listening tonight, don't you forget this. Anything that touches your mind that way is not a good thing. That is the ultimate invasion of your privacy.
Yes.
That is not good. That is usually 99.9% of the time, that is usually a definite what? Spiritual attack going on.
Yeah.
Well, it may not feel like it. That's what it is. And when they approach you that way, just like the very famous Annabelle we've heard so much about here lately, that's how that demon with Annabelle started to try to do things, try to arrange things. They open these avenues of communication for very bad purposes, folks. But yet we say, oh, he's so good. He's a guardian of the forest. No, that's not his job. He doesn't wear a hat like Smokey the Bear, folks.
Yeah.
Bigfoot is not Smokey the Bear, okay? I can't. He is living out. If he's living out there, and like I said, I know he's real because I've seen him. Okay, I didn't pick up the feeling he was Smokey Bear. He was a guardian of the forest, and they're the forest people and all. I feel like he is a major survivalist. Definitely. Yeah. And he's doing this stuff. But I'm gonna tell you something you better think about, and you better always remember this, whether it's Dogman, Bigfoot, whatever. These guys are out there trying to survive, and that means, listen very closely, that you got to do anything that it takes to survive. Okay, let me tell you something right now, Brenda. If the lights go out and they never come back on again, you will wake up to a different world in the morning.
Yes.
You will wake up to a world of savages. People who will cut your throat for a piece of bread.
Yeah.
Because you got to do that to do what? Survive.
That's right.
That's where humanity goes out the door. And that's what these guys are doing, and you can't blame them because a mountain lion has to do the same thing. I've run into mountain lions, okay? You know, I had an old tracker tell me one time, when you see the mountain lion, it's already too late. And when when you actually get a chance to see Bigfoot, and you are very lucky to do that, believe me, because I've been there, or even Dogman, or the other type monsters we're talking about now. When you see these things, you got to take one thing away from it, and that is you're not really dealing with human beings on your level.
Right.
Whatever that level may be. And there's a lot of levels with humanity, of course. But I'm just saying you're on a different level altogether, and you got to always remember that. And the number one rule of monster hunt, there are three canonical rules. Canonical rules of monster hunting. Number one is, the hunter must never become the hunted.
Yeah.
That's very true also. And number two is, the second rule as you go by, is that you always respect what you're hunting. I'm not saying you admire it and love it. I'm saying you respect it for what it can do.
Right.
And the third rule is that the monster hunter must never become the monster. And those are the three that you got to go by when you do monster hunting. Okay. And there's a lot of other rules, but those are the three main ones. But when it comes to these things, you got to throw some of this stuff out. You got to think along different lines and understand what it is you're truly dealing with. And I've seen that happen. You see all these people walking out trying to get a selfie with a buffalo. How stupid can you be?
Right? And especially because you know what that's going to do to you.
Yeah.
Now, you don't know exactly what Bigfoot's going to do. Don't hunt him. You want to go hang out in the woods, go hang out in the woods. But you know what? You see that? Back away. Back away.
And if you come out way alive, you're incredibly lucky again. Don't do stupid things like that, folks.
Right?
Don't do that. Because, that is, here's another thing, and I'm one about respect. I don't like to see anybody disrespect anybody with anything. And that isn't kind of a disrespect to wild animals. Don't disrespect them like that. You better respect them because they can do a lot more than you really truly understand they can do. And they're smarter than you think they are.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Don't ever underestimate that. Don't ever do that because that's really not good for you to do. Absolutely.
Right. And I mean, they're brought up out there in the wild. So, they know what they're doing. They don't, they've had to live like that. So they're going to survive whether you like it or not. And that's, do you remember when you were on the forest, one of the things that I was always taught was when you leave to go to work, the main thing you need to think all the time is no matter what, you're going home. Mm-hmm. So to these, Bigfoot and all that, they're going to survive. That's their thinking.
That's very much like things that happen with the coyotes, and I've seen a lot of coyotes in the field, definitely. And when they first started coming up where I live in South Carolina, we didn't have them for many, many years. I know you've had them out in Texas for a long time and all that way. But and you guess what else is coming back? Jaguars are coming back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I know a lot of people over the years say, mean little evil coyotes ate my dog. Well, it is bad, but that was your problem. You should not let your dog got in that kind of a situation. Okay, for one thing, you should have been watching your dog and your cat. Okay. But you can't blame the coyote. He's just doing what it takes to survive.
Yes. His natural instinct.
Now, of course, when you eat your chickens, it's a bad thing, and I understand that. I see your perspective too. Okay. That's what Humphrey Bogart said in Casablanca. I understand the viewpoint of the hound as well as the fox. Okay. That's the way it goes. But you got to know that's what you got to do. And Bigfoot's not out there pulling up daisies and playing with butterflies, okay? He is out there surviving. That means running down deer and tearing them open and eating them, whatever the situation needs to be. He's going to do what it is. You got to respect him for that, and Dogman as well. Yeah. And anything else out there that's living in the wild. But then you cross a line with monsters. You got sort of the more natural kind of monsters. And then you run into the more unnatural type of things that you run into. That's where you come to things like ghouls and zombies and other stuff like that, which are rooted deep, like the werewolf, in diabolical power and darkness that a lot of these things supposedly come out of. And like when I first started hunting monsters years ago as a kid, that was one of the very first things I went. I used to haunt libraries back in the old days, folks. We didn't have internet, you know.
Yeah.
I spent hours and hours in reference rooms of libraries. They wouldn't let you take the books home either. You got to leave the books there, so you had to take notes. If you wanted to go away with something to learn or study, you had to take notes on it, you know. And I remember years ago when they first came out with a little small cassette tape players. I thought that was wonderful. I'd sneak them in the libraries and read the book on the thing, you know, and take it home and listen to it. That was one of the ways you had to do it, okay? But when I was young, and that was one of the very first books I picked up was on Haiti and Jamaica, places like that. And the zombie was fascinating because there are different kinds of zombies, Brenda. A lot of people do not realize that. And you got to throw Hollywood out the door when it comes to this, okay? We got to
Right.
remember something about Hollywood. Hollywood is 99.9% made up stuff. Okay, it's not real, folks. Okay, that's how Hollywood makes its money and spreading butter. It's dealing that. So they take what they want, like a smorgasbord or a fast food place. They take out what they want out of folklore and use it, but they twist it and turn it and bend it all different kinds of ways.
Right.
Like I mentioned before the show. Tolkien said not to ever forget the old wise tales, for there is much wisdom in them for us to learn. And that's very, very true. And that's what folklore, and why I venerate folklore so much, why I like it so much, because it's not, you got to disseminate it though. There's a lot of layers of it that you got to get through legend to get to the truth of these things. And I've given you my favorite quote of all time by Herbert Spencer, who once said that every myth and legend known to mankind is not without its authentic foundation.
Right.
And that is very, very true. And that is what true folklore is. And it gives us indicators, clues, and patterns to the things that we're looking for. And they teach us so much that we need to know. So forget Hollywood. You gotta forget Hollywood because it's been put through some kind of weird filter, okay? Weird filters in Hollywood. And that's not just the glamour filters that they use. But that's the way it goes with werewolves and zombies and all that. So real zombies, my friend, do not eat your brains.
You're right.
They don't bite you at all. Okay? They're not about eating people. That's the big misconception in Hollywood. That got started back with the Night of the Living Dead and all that. And if you remember, if you go back to the original Night of the Living Dead, which I still have to watch every now and then, if you go back, I remember being on date night with my girlfriends watching that at drive-in movies. But anyway, they never once said the word zombie in that movie, folks. They call them ghouls, and that's what they are. Okay? Ghouls eat you. Yes, they will. They will eat you up. Not just your brains. They don't care. They're not picky. They'll eat anything. Okay? And that includes your dog, they'll eat worms, whatever.
Right.
Here's the thing about the ghoul. Very much like the Wendigo. Okay, the Wendigo is a spirit of intense darkness and hunger. And that is exactly what the European ghoul that we hear. Actually, the ghoul begins in Arabia with Lilith and stuff like that. Okay, that's where it originates. The word ghoul is actually Arabic for demon.
Oh.
Okay, that's what it means. But there are supposedly different kinds of ghouls, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, getting back to the zombie. A zombie is a product of black magic voodoo. And there are two different kinds of zombies. Or more, there may be sort of slight divisions on that, okay? But there are two major differences in this. You have a real dead zombie or an undead zombie and then you have a human zombie. And that was the first thing that I did when I was in the reference library. Actually, I said, wow, this is mind blowing. Science is backing this up that there's real zombies. Okay. But the real zombies, now let me explain this to you, never ever really truly died. It just looked like they did.
Yeah. Drugs are a bad thing,
Okay,
people.
because the FOLKLORE brings them back, but he's not really bringing them back. Let me tell you something. Let me stop right here and I'll get a little religious with you here, okay? The only one I have ever found in this universe that can really truly raise the dead, really now, is God. That's it. Point blank, folks. Nobody else can do it. But there's a lot of gray areas in that, okay? But I'm talking about actually truly bring somebody back from the dead. Only God's been known to do that, okay? That's all I can tell you about that. The FOLKLORE gives his victim usually the poison of the pufferfish and some other stuff too. It's not just that alone. If you use that in the wrong way, that will stop your heart immediately, by the way.
Right.
Very powerful stuff. But they use it and they make a derivative of it with other ingredients and stuff that they do. And you give this to that person will get sick and die, but they're not really dead. It just looks that way. The heart gets very, very slow and low, and the breathing gets very
shallow.
If you're not a medical doctor, you will think that person's dead. Okay, and so that's where they come in, Brenda. They make the mistake of saying, "Oh, they're dead," you know.
And
gone.
But then they bury them, and then they're really not dead.
I've lost your sound.
Oh, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Your sound's gone. Yeah.
Susie, can you hear me? Okay, Susie can hear me.
We got no sound. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Your sound is cut off. I don't know what's.
Sounds good here.
How about now, Dennis? Okay, everybody in the chat can hear me. Dennis, it's you. It's yours.
Yeah, because I hear you fine.
He
froze up. Oh no, he's there.
What's going on with that?
Let me message him.
That's.
Yeah, let me message him.
He can't hear you. He's talking, but you can't hear him, right?
Right.
Maybe he has to check out and check back in or something.
Can you hear me, Susie?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
How about now, Dennis?
Susie either, I don't think.
Oh, you can't
Can you hear Brenda?
Okay. No.
Can you hear you, Brenda?
No.
No?
He can't hear me.
That's weird.
No.
Everybody can hear
me?
Yeah, we can all
hear Brenda. I
Yeah.
can hear you. Mm-hmm.
Go out, come back in, Dennis. Go out and come back in.
Well, the connection went off when Susie came in, I think. That's something like that. It's kind of weird stuff.
Susie, did you mess up my connection?
Okay, well, we solved that problem.
Nothing to do with it.
Oh, okay. It works now? You can hear me now, Dennis?
Yeah. I hear you fine now. I hear you, Susan. I hear you, Susan. Okay. All right.
Good deal.
But anyway, what I was going to say is that everybody thinks Uncle Joe's dead, and so they bury him. But he's not really dead. The FOLKLORE comes back. He may wait a couple of days because he knows his victim is not having to worry about breathing in that coffin, He's got very shallow breath and all that stuff. So they know how to play this game, okay, because they've done it a lot. So he comes back and he digs him up in the night. He digs Uncle Joe back up and he revives him. But he doesn't revive him 100% all the way. Just enough to animate him. And so he becomes under the control of the FOLKLORE. The FOLKLORE. So he, in essence, he becomes the slave of the priest, okay, the FOLKLORE. He becomes his slave and does exactly what they would do with these people when they would do this, they would work them out in the sugarcane fields. This was free labor, okay? You go out and get your labor in the graveyard, all right? And bring them
Wow.
back and work them.
Is
Now,
that what you
here's
call
an
the graveyard shift?
Yeah.
And
The
here's the
graveyard
wild.
shift.
Oh yeah, free labor. Yeah, and look, you had to still feed the zombies. They had to feed them. Okay, they have to still feed them and give them water. They're living human beings. They're living zombies, but they're in such a stupor. They're under such drug control that they have no willpower of their own. Okay, only what the Bokor tells them to do. Okay, and if you go work and they work them to death out there. I mean, they put them to work from sun up to sundown, and then they them back and they will put them on mats in a hut and leave them there. This has gone on for years and years in Haiti and Jamaica and places like that, and even parts of Africa where this has happened, which is where it
A lot of
originated.
weird stuff happens in Africa. Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing about it. Here's the wild thing. You got to be very careful with one thing. They still feed them, but they feed them the most plainest food possible, gruel or whatever, just enough to keep them alive. Okay. The one thing that they cannot let past that zombie's lips, and that's salt. If they get any kind of salt, it does something to the drugs in their system and brings them out of that stupor.
Yeah, I think they sweat it out probably more. Yeah.
And there's a very famous case.
What does the scripture say about losing your salt, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, they don't put any salt in their food or anything. They can't let them have any kind of salt, sea salt, anything. Now, there's a very famous case where somehow or another this guy got some salt and he came out of his stupor and he come to himself and said, "Where am I at? What's going on?" And he went back home and he went to his sister's house, knocked on the door. She comes to the door and passes out. Because her brother's come back from the dead. And he's knocking on her front door. And he said, "Where have I been?" And for like 2 years of his life, he was a zombie and didn't know it. This is the real story, folks. I'm not making this up.
Yeah.
This is scientific fact and record.
Right. Zen Ray says something about what about the face-eating guy in Florida? That was actually drug induced.
Well, I'm going to tell you this now. Since I was in law enforcement, I'm going to tell you a very sad case.
With a demon helping along.
Okay. What drugs will do to you? Actually, we had a case when I was a policeman a few years back. She was on meth. This woman was. And she actually, I was there. I didn't see it, but I mean, afterwards, that I ran to. Actually, she clawed her own eyes out.
Oh God.
Yeah.
And she is still alive. I mean, she's alive and all that. But she, of course, she'll never see again. And she finally got off drugs and all that. But that is what the power of drugs. And I've seen that happen. I mean, I was with a group of 6 policemen one day, and we had this little 90-pound guy, skinny as a rail. It took all 6 of us to hold this guy down and handcuff him. That's what
drugs is the same.
It takes away that inhibited part of you that your mind says, "I can't do this," and drugs says, "Yes, you can." It takes that to make it out. That's a dangerous situation. Really, when you run into somebody like that, no wonder they're eating people's faces off and doing all this kind of stuff. And even animals. You've heard of cocaine bear, right? Could you imagine? Could you imagine a grizzly bear on cocaine?
Oh my God!
Can you hear me, Dennis?
No.
Oh. Hey, Dennis, can you hear me? Am I mute?
No, you're not mute. What's up, Susie?
Dennis, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Okay.
Okay. I was going to say, you're talking about drugs. Drugs is in the Bible is pharmacopoeia. Pharmacopoeia is the same as sorcery.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's a big part of sorcery, witchcraft, and black magic, and all that is drugs, plants. That is a part of what we call earth magic. That's where they get the ingredients from nature that they use, but they take it and turn it to a dark attributes. Instead of trying to cure diseases and help people with their ailments and all that, they turn this stuff into doing dark things like this, or poisoning people, or whatever the situation is. Even love potions and all that stuff. That is that is the way that black magic goes. And, of course, that's a show for another time, too, because there's a big study in that. Matter of fact, I'm fixing to do a show on my show, Hunting in the Shadows, about the 9 gates of black magic. There are 9 gates there are 9 powers they wish to get out of this darkness. One of them, like invisibility, like being able to fly, like being shapeshifters. The list goes on and on. The things that they want to accomplish, and one of those things is that they use portals to move with, and they use magic plants to use their magic and do their magic with it and all that stuff. So this stuff's a long list of these things. But
Wow.
these witch doctors in Africa began all this kind of stuff. They studied the puffer fish and all these other things and understood what their properties are. But they didn't say, hey, I can help people with this, somebody comes to me with it. No, they didn't look at it that way because their hearts were darkness. That's the way that these people are dealing with things, But then that's the human zombie. But there is such a thing, supposedly, as a undead zombie, a real dead zombie. And what it basically is nothing but a reanimated corpse inhabited by a demonic spirit.
Oh, see, now that I would definitely have to just look and say, oh, yeah, I'm away from this thing.
Well,
find a way to take it out.
Yeah, this was one of those gates I talked about. It's called necromancy, okay? And necromancy covers a lot of different areas of the dead, dealing with the dead. And you can supposedly take a date. Like, okay, say, Brenda, if you drop dead on us here, okay? And I wanted to bring you back. And I said, well, I want Brenda to be either a vampire or a zombie or something like that. Then I could do some certain rituals over your body, do certain things to your body and the magic that it needs to be done, and open your body up to a demonic spirit and give your body to that demonic spirit and reanimate you that way. Let me tell you a quick story about that. And somebody told me this. Remember back when Katrina hit, of course?
Yes.
This happened in New Orleans, on the outskirts of New Orleans. They were going from house to house looking for dead bodies in the houses, okay? And they came up on this one, and they would, they had like red paint. They would have to spray paint. They would go out and mark how many bodies were in that house.
Yep.
Well, they came up on this one house, and it said this house, they knew it was voodoo stuff, okay? It had the chicken claws hanging outside. It had the feather fetishes and all this stuff. They knew it was probably the home of a boko or something like that. And or a voodoo priestess, whatever name you want to call it. A Mama Loa or a Papa Loa. Anyway, in one of the back rooms in this house, they found a dead body chained to the wall. Now, I'm not going to get too descriptive for you here, but there are certain rituals in which you need to torture someone to death to get certain demonic power, okay? It's a horrible thing to think about. They do this with children, too, by the way.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I talked about this on my show last night called The Red Hunt. The Red Hunt is where these covens of vampires, werewolves, witches, Satanists get together and hunt little children for fun. It's the most devilish game ever invented.
Kind of like the Queen.
And they catch them, they rape them and torture them and then kill them and sacrifice them and all these things. This is real, folks. This is not, I've actually heard survivors to talk about this, okay? This is real stuff, but this is not just part of fun and games for them. They also acquire power through this kind of stuff, okay? So anyway, they find this dead body chained to a wall, okay? And it's still there. And he said they didn't know what to think about it, And we walked up and we're looking at it and talking about what we're going to do about this, And all of a sudden, and this thing is dead. There's no doubt about it. It's very decayed.
Frankenstein, huh?
And it lifts its head up and looks at them and laughs at them.
Oh, yeah.
He said they got out of there so quick they didn't know they don't even remember leaving. Okay,
that demon survived.
And it said that they went outside and marked the house 1 on it and left. and when the other guy said, "What was that thing?" He said, "I don't know, but it was a demon. It had to be some
Yes.
kind of a demon thing."
Yes, it
And
was.
that's probably definitely what it was. Somebody practicing necromancy. That's what it basically was. So that is your other zombie. That is the real undead zombie. And these things can be reanimated with a demonic being to go out and assassinate people too. Just like the
Yep.
human zombies can be done that way too. You can get them to do whatever you want to. And a lot of these folklores with the human zombies, they do women that way and have them as sex slaves. Okay.
Well,
They
think
use them
about
for sex.
think about it, Dennis. When you think about like MK Ultra and stuff like that, they can make these people do what they want them to do, and they use drugs and fear and torture to do it. So basically, they have found a way to make human zombies because at the drop of a word, they switch into something different. So, I mean,
Well, you could do that. You could do well. That is a major kind of way of brainwashing. Okay, let me put it this way.
yeah,
I could put you. Let's put it this way. I could put you in a monkey suit and
right?
put you in a cage and treat you like a monkey, feed you like a monkey. You will eventually become a monkey. Eventually, in your mind. Okay.
Right.
That's the way you work this kind of stuff. That's the way you truly brainwash people and do things to people. Even like these little poor little kids we're talking about, who are a lot of them are born and raised to be these sacrifices.
Yeah. Yep.
They there's a certain part of them that says, "Oh, well, this is what I'm supposed to do," and they're kind of okay with that. I know that sounds weird and twisted.
No, it doesn't. Not to us. We've dealt with
That's the
people like that.
psychological part of this. That's the
Yep.
psychological game that's going on. And let me tell you what, there is a whole lot of black magic that is mind over matter. They work
Dennis.
this way. Yeah. If I were going to put a curse on you tonight, Susie, I would definitely let you know that I was doing it, so that it would begin to work on your mind, and it would make it true. You'd almost make it come true. I had that happen to me one time. I had a black warlock blow goofer dust in my face and put a death curse on me. I shouldn't be here right now, okay? If I had believed in it, but I didn't.
Mind over matter.
And that broke his chain. He didn't like that. I laughed at him, okay? I'm not going to die. I'm not
Yeah.
going to die. This is not going to do that. But he wanted me to believe that so that I could make it come true for him. That's another part of the magic that they use on you. So yes, there's definitely like the MK Ultra stuff. There's a lot of that going on. They definitely, but also drugs play a very important part in that as well, because they inhibit you. Like I said, like we were talking about earlier, you don't know how much adrenaline you're using. You don't know what's going on with it. Drugs take the boundaries off your mind.
Yep.
And sometimes those boundaries are good to be there. Definitely. Especially if it has anything to do with civilization. You can make someone an animal very quickly that way. But we also know that science takes the things like dogman or giants or whatever the situation may be, and maybe even Bigfoot, and use them for their own purposes, their experimentation or whatever it is they want to do, to whatever their goal is to accomplish. They got to have a foundation to begin with,
Right.
whatever it may be, whether it's children or adults or monsters, whatever the situation. That's how they work in that respect. But yeah, there's a whole lot. Hey, if you want to be honest about it, we're being brainwashed 24/7.
Yep. We sure
Dennis,
are.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You know what a golem is?
Oh, I call it. Now that goes deep into Hebrew. The Hebrew esoteric type stuff that went on back in the day. Supposedly, it is a form of the Kabbalah magic that will allow you to sometimes get revenge or guardianship over things. The golem is brought to life supposedly through dark powers, and some people claim it's the power of God, but it's not really, because Kabbalah has a very slanted way of looking at things. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and like I said earlier about the hounds of God, You can't do evil. You can't use evil to do good, and that's
That's
what the
true.
golem is all about. And so
Yeah.
there's a lesson in the golem because you bring and reanimate this thing, but basically it is a spirit in it that reanimates this clay figure to
Yeah.
do the things you want to do. Becomes your robot, becomes your zombie per se.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's not made of flesh. It's made of clay or whatever ingredients you mix together with the clay to get this thing. But it also has in its mouth a scroll, supposedly, that brings this magical scroll that brings this thing and animates it. But a lot of people believe that a golem is very much like a walking divot box
Yeah.
because it is inhabited by a spirit. That's what that scroll supposedly lets that spirit enter the golem, and it's supposed to be
Yeah.
under your control. But don't ever believe that. That's the biggest lie of all.
Yeah.
You're
They
the
make
one.
them.
You're the
Yeah.
one being controlled, not the
Yeah.
golem.
They was pretty popular. The Jewish people would making those things. You know.
Oh yeah. Supposedly, a lot of the Kabbalah practitioners would use it mostly as guardians or for
Yeah.
revenge too.
A
If
lot of them use
the
it for
enemies are coming,
bodyguards and stuff
Jewish
like that.
people,
Yeah.
yeah. They would
Yeah.
sick us the golem on them, yeah. You know, they would
Yeah.
do it. Yeah.
Made their own zombies.
Mhm. Yeah. But the interesting thing about it, though, I think, is that it was not flesh. It was clay. But, you know, it goes back to the fact that the golem is founded in that very that we were formed out of the dust of the
Out of
ground.
the
We
dust.
were
Yeah.
formed out of clay, really, you know, in that way. You know, and there's a
What is
very
it?
interesting thing seen in the New Testament where a man who is blind from birth comes to Jesus and says, you know, Lord, heal me. And Jesus knows that this man's never had eyes. Okay. And Jesus spits on the ground and makes mud with his
Hmm.
spittle and then rubs them on that man's eyes and he can see. He recreated that man's eyes in his head out of the clay on the ground, out of the dust of the ground. That's the basis for the golem that is
And there's
made out
stories
of
of
clay
Jesus
like we are.
making birds from
But
clay,
yet, it's still not
giving
flesh
them
and blood
life.
like we
Yeah.
are. Yeah.
So I guess back in those days, clay was very easy to come by, so that's what they used. I mean,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, not just everybody, man. I don't think it was a thing. You know, the golem is. You know, there were many of them. I think it was a community effort sometimes.
Well,
They would
here's what
go
it
through
says
these.
on Wiki. It
Yeah.
says a creature. The
Yeah.
golem is a creature from Jewish folklore, traditionally a figure made of clay brought to life by magical ritual. The most well-known story involves Rabbi Judah Loew ben Bezalel of Prague, who created a golem to protect the Jewish community from
Yeah, the one in
persecution.
Prague is very. There have been others supposedly, but that one
Yeah,
in Prague is one of the very
that was a
famous
famous one.
legends.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But the interesting thing about it is that I think it was more or less sometimes a community effort thing. They were saying, "Hey, we got this problem in the community, or we have somebody out there this, whatever it is. We need a golem. We need a guardian, a protector." That's what they were
Kind of like having your
making
own
it for.
pet robot back in the
Yeah,
day out of
and they
clay.
would send it out for that. It was not a lot of people think it's Hollywood again. Okay, we've been talking about Hollywood earlier. But this thing is supposed to be like an assassin thing sent out, and it wasn't really not. I don't think intended for that purpose. Although it could have been used by very evil people for that, definitely. But it was more of a guardian type thing, more than anything else. You know, in that respect. But it's an interesting thing as well. But you know, it's very much like the zombie in that way. But like I was saying, now the ghoul, which is a completely different. Zombies is not going around eating people. Real zombies do not eat people. But ghouls, on the other hand, are a different matter altogether. And that's what we're talking about in the original Night of the Living Dead. They call them ghouls. And they did them that for a reason because they had now the traditional ghoul. There can be two types of it. And the word ghoul actually is Arabic for demon. That's what it means. And it is also supposedly one of the children of Lilith, and and now you're going back into some more Jewish folklore here.
She,
Lilith
yeah,
was
she
the
had all the
first wife
demons.
of Adam, and she would not submit to Adam, and so she vacated the garden and supposedly went out into the wild. Matter of fact, the Bible speaks
Supposedly had
of
children with
street
Satan,
fowl.
Samuel, Satan. Yeah,
Yeah, she is called sometimes the mother of demons, the
yeah,
screech owl,
yeah.
and she is
Because she
also
dwells with the screech
associated.
owls and the satyrs. It says in the Bible.
Yeah, the satyrs and all the other stuff. She's supposed to be in the wild, and also she is associated with Lamia sometimes, in a way as well, and of course Hecate, the queen of witches. She's supposed to be associated with that as well.
Yeah.
She is also venerated in today, and I don't really go along with this too much. I think I'd pick out somebody better for a symbol, but she is venerated a lot by women's rights people who think that she kind of symbolizes,
Independence or
freedom for women and
yeah.
all that. But I don't
No,
know.
no,
I
she's
wouldn't
not.
pick her
That
out as a good example, but
yeah.
Yeah, that's
She's
not a
an
good
evil
one.
witch. Let's put it that way. A very evil witch.
yeah. Well, she got a bad name for it, definitely, but her children are supposedly demons and ghouls, by the way,
Yeah,
inhabit
yeah.
caves and desolate, dark places and wilderness places too. But also, the
I've had a
European
couple
ghoul,
encounters with her in the spiritual, Dennis.
yeah, the
Yeah.
European ghoul lives in graveyards and devours the freshly buried dead, supposedly.
She
And
kills the children in the cribs, and the Jewish people have to put the names of the angels in the room because she brings crib deaths to the children.
yeah, oh yeah, well,
Yeah.
the ones now that, and you're getting into a lot of what are called the jinn as well, in Arabic legends as well, goes along with that too, and there are different types of jinn, and they're
A
associated.
lot of Jewish folklore, yeah,
Yeah,
stories, yeah.
yeah, they're associated too with um, the with Lilith as well, to a certain extent.
Mm.
But the jinn were also looked upon as sort of like fallen angels in a way too. Um, they're very interesting as well, but they inhabit a lot of caves supposedly, and of course, that's the perfect hiding place. If you're going to be a monster, I'd head for the caves definitely. Be hanging out with
Right.
angels. That's where you're
You
going
know,
to
they
live.
say that the place that they summon the jinns is on your toilet because it's the dirtiest place where the feces are.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
well, supposedly there are lower class jinns, and you have different classes like the European demons that you talk about, or the Christian demons. You have different classes of jinn that do different things, and you have some that interact more with human beings, and then you have some that interact more with the animal kingdom, and some that interact more with the world on baser ways, like toilets and all that other stuff. Definitely, you got that as well. That's an interesting outlook too. But there again, like Brendan and I were talking about earlier, you're kind of humanizing stuff to a certain extent. You're looking through a human filter at things. That may be slightly different than what they really are, the way you're looking at it. So you have to be very careful how you look at these things. But I think the jinn, very much like fallen angels and demons, are
Pretty much
definitely
the same thing, yeah.
classified. They have different levels and different jobs, you might say, that they supposedly do, things that they oversee. I can tell you this without a doubt, and in my studies, I found this to be very true. There's a big difference between demons and fallen angels. A lot of people get that mixed up all the time. They think demons are angels and fallen
They
angels are
pretty much are the
demons.
same thing.
Yeah, there's two different things altogether that you're dealing with here. But there's a lot of contention that demons were never actually human beings like you and I, but they were partially human because they were these offspring of what we call them the Nephilim. That's basically what they were supposed to be, the offspring of fallen angels and human women. But they were not, they lost their humanity. They became evil spirits when they perished in the flood and all that. Supposedly, this is where the origin of the true Christian
Dennis,
demons that we talk about started.
if you go back and read the book of Enoch, and it talks about the battle that took place between the angels that came down here and the God's angels, and when they killed them in the flesh, then it says they became bodiless spirits, which they became the demons. So
Yeah,
they were actually beings that were living as angels, but fallen angels. But yeah, they were
now
actually living.
the fallen angels.
That's all in the book of
I think
Enoch. Yeah.
I think are more like have taken the base now, more like supervisors.
A fallen means that they've rejected the Most High and they turned away and to their dark ways. It means they fell away from God. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they rebelled against God, of course, but they also, I think, their plan was against the creation, God's creation. They could not take heaven, and so they have a plan to destroy the creation of God. Okay, and that includes us as well. And I think their plan all along was to mess up the bloodline of humanity by doing this with human women. And it's sort of a genetic experiment like going on, like we talk about with governmental sources. I think that all this is definitely connected in a pattern that is plainly there to see if you look hard enough. And it is a diabolical plan that is still being implemented by these things. And this also is the creation of where a lot of monsters were created, a lot of hybrids were created out of this, because they weren't only messing around with human women, they were messing around with all of creation in many aspects. They were hybridizing a lot of things, and that's where you get
Animals.
mermaids and satyrs, things like the god Pan, supposedly. And of course, on top of all this, the fallen angels were masquerading as gods, getting people to worship them and believe that they were gods. It's a very long and detailed story, and it is a definite, I would believe without a doubt, 100% thing is still going on to this day. The plan is still being implemented, and unfortunately, there's certain governments of the world that are in bed with them. They are cooperating with them. They have opened doors.
They probably are demons. Most of these politicians.
I had years ago, I was approached by the CIA and asked questions.
Lucky you.
I was approached by the CIA to answer some questions on demonology. And what struck me is that why do they need to know about demons? This is the government, okay? And that was what
I wonder.
Yeah, that spoke volumes.
Why do they need to know anything, Dennis? Yeah.
And, I met with this guy, and he actually showed me his credentials and all that. I mean, it was on the real up and up and all. And he said he was going around getting information on this, and he wanted to know, well, basically how you call forth demons, how you, open the doorways to these things and all that. He was asking all these questions, and I'm thinking, why do you need to know this? Why are you asking this to begin with? And here's the interesting thing: at the end of the conversation, I didn't tell him a whole lot. He says he offers me a job. Says, you should join the company. Where we're looking for people with supernatural talents. And I thought, well, what else have you got? I heard online out here. Have you hired werewolves, vampires, and all these witches and all these other things? And because he was talking about remote viewers, he was talking about psychics. The whole line. He said, we are interesting. We're very interested in this, and especially in hiring these kind of people. We would like for you to be on board. But I said, well, thanks, but no thanks. I'm very busy right now. Because I was not going to join the CIA, because I found out a long time ago, most of the time when you retire, you do it through the morgue. And I wasn't going that route. But it was all legitimate. It was a real thing. And that's what floored me. Why do you need to know these things? I tell you why, then. Because they've opened some doors, I think, that they should have left closed.
Yeah, it's when they hired Michael Aquino to come in there and work for them and summoned all the demons. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you something. They're looking to hook up with power, any kind of power, because that's what they're all about, control and power. And that's what these guys, this darkness is all about as well. Like those little children were talking about with the red hunt and all this. It's not just about the fun and games for them. It is power too, and that's what they're looking for. And these rituals, whether or not you know you're engaging in them, you see a lot of these people on stage in Hollywood and singers doing all these weird rituals. It's not just entertainment. There's another reason behind it. They use these rituals to increase their power, and they're using you to do that by watching. Although you don't really realize you're cooperating with it, you are.
Right.
So you're a part of the ritual. And that's never good to do, people. Just using and abusing people, no matter which way you look at it. Just like those poor little children we're talking about and other people that they use and abuse, whatever the situation is. But they do these horrible things to acquire the power that they want. And the other thing that drives these people is they're playing what I call the God game. They want to be gods. They want to be immortal, because you can have all the power, money, and fame in the world that you want, but you got to die and leave it one day. But they don't want to do that. They want to carry on with that. So they're looking for immortality in all the wrong ways, whether it be with clones or robots or drones or whatever the situation. They're looking to get that immortality to go along with the rest of it. That's another thing that's driving them in this darkness. Right. But here's the thing about it, and people do not realize this. Whenever you deal with the darkness, you think you can cooperate with it, and you think you're controlling it, but it's really the other way around. It's controlling you. And that's what I try to get across to the CIA guy. I say, look, if you mess with this stuff, you think you got it under control, you are badly mistaken. It's controlling you. It's always the other way around. You don't control it. I have actually been in a place where demons were raised, and something very badly went wrong there. Okay, there was human blood on the walls. I'm not going to get too deep into that, but I could feel the evil in that place. It was still there. It was just as real as if I'd walked into a fog bank. You know what I'm saying? That's how much it felt like that. And I knew something very badly. I saw the symbols. I knew it was not some kids playing around. This was a real deal thing. Somebody was doing, and something went wrong. The circle was broken. But you stand in the middle. Supposedly, this is you do the symbols in the ground, you do the pentagram, and you do all the stuff you need to do. You're supposedly protected in the middle of this. And the demon's on the outside. If he gets in that circle, he's got you, and he knows that. Okay? If you let your guard down for 1 second, he'll be on you like white on rice. And I've seen it happen. I've seen people get possessed like that, jump from one person to another person, because unfortunately their spiritual doors are open.
Yep.
And foolishly, and I know these people in government don't even know what the heck a spiritual door is.
Right.
So they're like a little kid playing with a loaded revolver. Sooner or later, something bad is gonna happen.
Yep.
And I guarantee you it's already happened. Who knows what they have turned loose in this world?
Oh, I can only imagine.
But that's where a lot of your monsters. You want monsters? That's how you get monsters. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So, our little friend, the Wendigo.
Oh, yeah.
Is the that guy. Do you think those are also created from the black magic, or are they something different?
It is basically created by the dark magic of the human heart. The Wendigo is a symbol of hunger and longing, coldness and darkness. That is the symbol of winter, definitely. The hard, lean times When you can't make it anymore, when you do any, like we talked about earlier, anything, whatever it takes to survive, that's the Wendigo, and it symbolizes that spirit. Now I'm gonna say something about the Wendigo here. Forget about that stupid Hollywood image of that thing walking around with deer antlers. Okay, that is not a Wendigo. Okay, I don't know what that is. That's something somebody in Hollywood made up. A Wendigo, when you do describe it, it was supposedly ever seen, and it's not very often seen. But it is described as a gigantic zombie in many ways, or a dead-looking thing, an undead thing. That's what it is. It is an undead thing, but it is a evil spirit formed and made out of darkness and hunger and the darkness of the human heart. Brings this thing forth and gives it vitality, and it has a hunger to the point where it would eat its own self and never stop and never get enough. Very much like the vampire in many ways, or even the skinwalker in some ways. There's some similarities, but they're not the same thing. But they have similar motives in some ways. But the Wendigo has a hunger that can never be filled, like the vampire. And the skinwalker, to a certain degree, in spiritual ways, has a hunger. This thing can never get filled. It can eat and eat and eat and eat. It can eat up a whole town and never satiate its hunger. But it's insatiable. Hunger drives it. And it is a complete symbol for the people, especially the indigenous peoples who knew about the Wendigo. They didn't want to talk about it. They knew it was out there. And here's the other attribute of the Wendigo. Here's what makes it so downright dangerous in many ways, more than just eating you up or eating you alive, supposedly. It can possess you. If it finds a darkness in your heart, whatever that darkness may be, it hooks up with that darkness and overtakes you and possesses you. You become the Wendigo. And then you will kill and eat people. And it's also that taboo throughout many cultures in the world. You just don't eat your friends. Okay, you don't eat your neighbors. You don't eat people. You don't do that. That is a true evil,
Right.
for the indigenous peoples most everywhere in this world. You just don't do that. Unless you're in certain parts of Indonesia, but that's another story.
Yeah.
You're on the menu.
Right.
Absolutely. But yeah, that's what it basically is. And that's the dangerous part of it. It can possess you. And here's another thing. It is very much like the Rougarou. The
Oh,
Rougarou, which is found in the bayous mostly, is born out of a darkness like this too, but it's usually because you're not a good Catholic, or you violated the tenets of Lent or Ash, Sunday. You've done some bad, Ash Wednesday, you've done some bad things that you shouldn't have done. Or,
So is that just a Catholic demon?
this evil spirit of the Rougarou will possess you.
huh. Wow.
But there's other ways to become a Rougarou too. You can also be a suicide, or you could have murdered someone. You spilled blood, innocent blood. You can also become a Rougarou, and also that's supposedly in some parts of the world how you become a vampire. Which
yes,
is another evil.
I've heard that. I've heard that over suicide. But I went to a Catholic school when I was younger, and when I was younger, I went to a Catholic church. So I have heard that's what they usually tell you. And I think that's more to put a fear in you about doing that, because that's one thing I've always thought of. No matter how low you get, don't ever do that, because you don't want that to happen to you. So, yeah.
Well, and that's what we were talking about the other day, and that's a fascinating story about the casket girls of New Orleans. We were talking about that. Matter of fact, I did a show with my friend Jessica Jones on that not long ago. We were talking about the Catholic nuns that were in charge of the casket girls back in the day, and I'm sure you know what I'm about to talk about here. They were sort of a power unto themselves, the nuns. They were teachers, they were counselors, they were the ones that really were the backbone of the church in many ways.
Right.
The priest was the head, but they were the backbone, definitely. and they held a lot of power and a lot of sway over people's lives in that respect, especially young people. You know. And that was the interesting thing about the casket girls when they first brought them into New Orleans. The Ursuline nuns got them and through the dead of night brought them into the convent. But I think that was for the safety of the women because there were more men in New Orleans than women. Okay. And
Yeah.
these were young, unmarried girls. And I
Right.
think and that's where the legend begins about the casket girls. And supposedly the casquettes, we call them caskets, but the French pronunciation is casquette, which is a small, like a little trunk type thing.
Right.
Supposedly, while they were transporting them in the dead of the night to the convent, dirt fell out of these things. So that people said, "Oh, they must be vampires. They got their grave dirt with them," kind of a thing. And so that's where the legend of the casket girls began. But that's an interesting thing. But I thought it was very interesting how the nuns played such a big part in that, and they were the ones who supposedly went to the archdiocese and the priest and the bishop and said, "Bless us about 100 foot of chain and about 100 nails, and we're gonna, keep these women, these vampire women, where they need to be."
Yeah.
That was an interesting part of it too. But I said, "Oh well, yeah, the nuns are taking control here. They're doing what they need to. Nun vampires hunters. That would be a great movie. Think about that."
Yeah. Nun vampire hunters. I could see that as a movie.
Yeah, that would be neat. But anyway, that's interesting how they're. But yeah, the vampire was supposed to be a lot of times someone, a evil, malevolent person, or or someone who commits suicide. It was doomed and down by the church. You're going to hell, but you would come back as an evil spirit kind of thing.
Right.
I actually had a case years ago. I'll tell it right quick. It's one of my vampire cases. I've hunted vampires several times, and I had a young girl come to me one day, and young, she was probably in her 20s, early 20s, and I met her at a restaurant. She wanted to talk to me. I think she had seen me on television or something, and she wanted to talk to me. And so I met with her, and she told me a very interesting story. She said, "My mother and I, we never got along. And my mother was a vicious, mean, and hateful woman, controlling. She was narcissistic to the max, woman." And said we just never got along. I love my mother, and I hated her too, in many ways. And my mother hated me in many ways. But my mother got cancer. And she came to me. She was the only child, I reckon. And she came to me and wanted to stay with me until, she had only a few months, maybe 2 or 3 months. Cancer was very advanced. And she wanted to stay with me. And so I did, She said, even then, though, she didn't soften up. She even got maybe harder. And she just really now hated everything. Her mother did. And she said her mother gave her one request. She said, "When I die, I want to be buried." She has a certain dress. This was a white satin-like dress that was sort of looked kind of like a wedding gown, but it wasn't. But I mean, it was a very fancy kind of gown. It was her favorite gown, I guess, or something. And she said, "No matter what you do, bury me in this. I want to be buried in this." Okay. So she said, "I'll do that, mother." So. And she did. When her mother passed away, she had her buried in that dress. And she said, "I remember that dress well because I took it to the funeral home. I took it. I knew I did what she wanted me to do." And she said, "Well, then Dr. Carroll, about a week after we buried my mother, and they buried her mother was in an above ground vault, okay, a mausoleum." And she said about a week later, the dreams began. So every night, the same dream over and over and over, during the night. And she said, my mother would come to me in the dream. And she said, well, I didn't like my mother. She was like putting her arms around me and holding me, wanting to hug me, putting her head on my, shoulder and trying to kiss my neck. And said that was not like my mother at all. My mother was a cold, vindictive woman. She didn't show emotion like that. And I said, in this dream, she's doing this. And I have such a awful feeling in this dream. And every morning when I
Shapeshifter.
wake up, I'm just drained. I'm like, I haven't slept at all. I'm tired, you know? Yeah. She said, I'm tired and all this stuff. And she said, I don't know what's going on here. And when I heard that, I said, red flag. I go, that red flag. I said, oh, this does not sound good at all. I said, this does not sound good at all. And this went on, I think, for a couple of weeks. And finally, I contacted the girl and I said, well, look, you know, I try not to scare people and
Right.
upset them on things like this, so I try to be as quiet and unobtrusive about it as possible. But I said, look, I don't think your mother's really resting good here. And
Right.
I need to find out. So I said, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to, for next 7 nights, I'm going to sit in the cemetery and I'm going to watch your mother's mausoleum, and see if there's anything going on here, any kind of thing that might be happening. And so that's what I did for 7 long, lonely, dark nights in that cemetery. I watched that mausoleum. About the third night while I was there, I saw something white moving out and among the tombstones in the graveyard.
Oh no.
I said, "Uh-oh, this is
Oh,
not
this is
going
not
good."
good.
And so I walked on out in the graveyard. Now I was not in the middle of the graveyard. I was on the outside looking in because it is against the law. And as a law
Right.
officer, I couldn't just, in a graveyard after sundown if not possible. Not a good idea to do it unless you got permission. And anyway, I go on out in the graveyard. It's just like something out of a movie. I'm looking around, I got the flashlight on. And all of a sudden, I walk up on this big white dog.
Oh.
And he's sitting there, and I said, "Oh, it's a dog, big white dog." But the dog is acting very strange. He's just sitting there looking at me. And usually, I'm a dog person. Dogs come up to me, They usually come up to me. They're real friendly. And I speak to the dog. I said, "Hey, boy, what you doing here?" Something. And the dog just sits there looking at me. Really weird. And he kind of cocks his head looking at me. And finally, it gets up and walks around, walks off and down through the graveyard, and it's gone. So I thought, whoa, that's weird. That's really weird.
Oops.
So anyway,
Mommy dearest.
yeah. So I'll come back to that again in a minute. But anyway, I said, that's really weird. So anyway, the 7 nights passed. Nothing else happened. So I go back to the girl and meet with her again, and I say, "Look, I watched, so nothing happened." She said, "The dreams are still going on. It's getting worse." I said, "I'm really getting worse. It's starting to affect my health. My headaches and all this stuff." So I said, "Well, look, there's one more thing I will do for you, and I think this will work." So I go back to the graveyard, to the cemetery, to the mausoleum, and I have a piece of blessed chalk. And I mark a cross with a chalk on that mausoleum. I didn't want to desecrate the grave, okay, anyway.
Right.
So I used chalk, and I marked it, and then I anointed it with oil, and I made a prayer, and then I spoke to this woman. I said, "Look, whoever or whatever you are, you do not belong in this world anymore. You need to go on, and you need to leave." I called the daughter's name. "You need to leave her alone, and you need to go away and not come back. You need to go find your rest, go to wherever you need to go. But do not return here again, and do not return to her again, and do not ever leave this place again." And so I went back, and I told her what I did. And she said, "Well, it must have worked because last night I did not have the dream." And the last I heard from her, she never had that dream again. But that definitely, my friends, is the way of
There you
Almighty.
go. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, God gives us power over demons. That's for sure.
Absolutely. We have authority over these things. That was given to us on the cross. That was one of the things given for us on the cross. And we have that authority, but we need to exercise it when we run into these
Right.
problems. It's like a muscle. You know, if you don't use your muscles, they go away. And this is a spiritual muscle that needs to be exercised more often. We need to take our welcome mats in, though.
Yeah, I have a mat, but it does not say welcome.
We
It
need
says
to do that
nothing.
in more ways than one, not just physical welcome mats, which is good and I get to do, but we need to. Here's what I was telling somebody the other day. The thing about all these things, demons, evil spirits, whatever name you want to give them, whatever their origin, whatever they may be, they're looking for opportunities. That's what they are. They're opportunists in waiting to. If you give them that, if you crack the door, let me tell you another quick story about vampires. I heard about this the other day. This woman stayed in an Airbnb in New Orleans, and she was there. She didn't want to stay in a hotel. She wanted to stay in. She was in the French Quarter, not off the French Quarter, in a nice little Airbnb that was there, and it had an outside door and everything to it. And she was a businesswoman. She's a very practical businesswoman. And the woman said, "You do whatever you want. We got, we're not that big on rules here. You do whatever you want." And it was a real nice place. She said, "We just have one rule: do not answer your door after midnight.
Oh,
Whatever you do, don't answer the door after midnight." Okay. And the woman thought, "Well, okay, I can put up with that. I guess I can do that." So the second night that she was in the Airbnb, she'd been to a meeting and all that. She was just tired and she was going to go to bed and get some rest. So about she had got her clothes and was getting into bed and everything, getting ready, and she got home kind of late, and said she heard a knock on the door, 3 knocks, boom, 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 and she looked at the clock and was shortly after midnight. She didn't even think about that, though. She went to know, who in the world could this be? It was the outside door. So she looks through the peephole, and there's this really nice, handsome young man standing out there. She said, "Oh, he was a movie star looking guy, Wow." So what? How lucky can a girl get, right? And so the guy says something. It sounds like, "Hey, I hate to bother you, but I think I left my phone in your room." That's what it sounded like thought he said. And she couldn't quite hear him. She said, "Well, let me crack." She had a chain on the door. "Let me crack the door open so I can hear him better. Probably, get a better look at it." So she cracks the door, and the guy smiles at her, and he said, "Never mind, that's all I needed." And he turns and walks off.
Oh.
And she said, "I got the weirdest, creepiest feeling." She said, "I shut that door, but I didn't sleep the rest of the night." And she said, "Now, ever since I've stayed there, no matter where I'm at," and she travels a lot, every once in a while after midnight, there's 3 knocks at my door.
Oh.
But I'm not going to open it.
Right.
Not ever again. So you have to be very careful, my friends, what doors you open in this world.
Yeah, especially stay away from anything that knocks 3 times on your door or anything else, because we all know that that's how they do it. That's how the demons, that's one of their signs. They knock 3 times.
Oh, yeah. That's like, I live very close to the Appalachian Mountains, and they are filled with darkness and magic and all kind of weird creatures and stuff. I can see the mountains from my front door. We have a lot of rules here, you've heard of them, I'm sure. You don't, you close your curtains and your doors after dark. You don't leave them open. There's certain things you don't answer if somebody calls your name, or you don't whistle after dark. There's certain things you don't do. If you're smart, and you want to survive, you want to stay alive.
Must be a lot of creepy things floating around out there.
Oh yeah, and there are definitely monsters and stuff out there that are just waiting for you to give them that opportunity they're looking for. It's like if you hear music in the woods at night, don't ever follow it, or don't follow lights in the woods. Certain things you don't do. I actually had a thing happen to me one time. This was many years ago, and it was really freaky. I was fishing one night. This was many years ago. I had went camping with a couple, and they had already went to bed. They were sleeping in the tent, and I was doing a little night fishing. I was sitting out on the door, just I guess getting ready to go to bed in a little bit, and I was sitting there. And we're out in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing around. Okay, there's nobody. There's no other campers. There's nothing around, and I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, off to my right in some bushes, probably about 10, 15 yards away, somebody says, "Help me." Very plainly. And I'm sitting there and said, "Well, what, this is like about 1 or 2 in the morning, okay? Help me," like that. And the freaky thing is it sounds like my voice.
Oh.
And I had been talking to my friends earlier. We'd been sitting there on the bank, and I'm thinking, this is like somebody, picked up on my voice or something. Weird feeling I'm getting here. And I'm sitting there and I keep listening. I don't say anything. You don't answer, And finally it says, it calls me, Dennis, help me. I said, okay. I got up. I said, look, I don't know who or what you are. You shouldn't know my name, but you get out of here right now. You leave now.
Right.
You don't go back. Because I'm not coming out there to where you're at. And so I just turned around. I went on, got in the bed, and went to bed, and that was it. That was the freakiest thing. How did it know my name?
Right.
And how did it use my voice like that? It sounded like my voice.
I would say it read your thoughts, and it also listened to your speech, and then reused it.
That's what I figured. It picked up on it sometime during the evening. It picked up on my voice and my name. That's the only way. But that's what we call a mimic. They mimic you. They're evil spirits that try to lead you off into the woods and get you lost and unalive you if they can. Supposedly, there's even a very I can't think of her name right off. I think the Sheeta or something that is an Irish fairy that supposedly does that. She's very much kind of like a vampire. She will lure men into the woods and then drain the life out of them.
Yep. Wow.
And she's very kin to the banshee in some ways.
So I bet that's the last time you went fishing in that spot.
Well, I don't think I ever went back there. Definitely not. But that was the creepiest thing. I don't know. That late at night, all alone out there, that was weird. I had a woman tell me a story that's very similar to that. That something happened to her at a campground like that, and I think that's why a lot of people go missing in these national parks and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, they get up and follow it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, the same thing kind of happened to her. She said that she was going to, this was the campground that had a bathroom, and she went out of her tent and was going to the bathroom, and said on the way, this woman was following her. She looked back and this woman's following her, and she gets to the bathroom and she gets in the bathroom and she never hears this woman come in. And said, and she starts out, that woman, she hears that woman calling her name.
Oh.
And she said she would not leave the bathroom. She said, I'm not leaving this bathroom because the creepy woman was outside. She was alone in this campground. Look at that woman all night long circled that bathroom calling her name to come out, come out, come out. And she said she stayed in that bathroom till the sun come up, and finally she left. The woman was gone. But said that was one of the creepiest things that ever happened to her. She said whether that was something that wasn't real or some psychotic killer or whatever it was, she said that was one of the weirdest things. But so the weird thing was that she didn't know this woman. She didn't know who it was. How did the woman know her name?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you something about demons, evil spirits and all that. They do have what we call preternatural knowledge.
Yeah.
They have some knowledge of things that we shouldn't have. I had that happen to me one time. I was dealing with a demonic case that there was a demon in one case, and about a week later, about 50 miles away, that same demon and somebody else called my name. But it called me by my middle name. There's no way it should have known my middle name. Okay. And it's almost like I got a network. And here's the weird thing. the demon made a joke about it. The demon is what the demon said to me. I never said. He said, Dennis, you really are Dionysius.
You really are what?
That's Greek for Dennis. Dionysius, where you get Dennis from. Okay. And I'm going, he's making a joke out of my name here. But that's the way demons work. They try to play mind games with you.
Right. They taunt you and yeah. They're not fun. You know.
He called you who? He called you a certain person?
You ever run into demons? It's a good idea not to play with them. You don't play around with them.
Right. No, the demon called him Dionysius, which is Greek for Dennis.
Oh,
yeah. So it was playing with him.
Well, it knew I knew.
It wasn't Dionysius.
I knew I knew
Greek
that.
god or
something.
Something.
He wanted me to know he knew that too. I guess.
Wasn't there a Greek god or something named that or something? Was he referencing
Dionysus.
somebody else?
Yeah, Dionysus. That was Dionysus.
Yeah. Dionysius is the party god, the god of Greek wine, women, and song. Yeah. Dionysius, yeah. Bacchus. He's also Bacchus in the Roman canon.
So was he a Greek demon?
Huh. He might have thought it, but see, they know a lot of things.
Actually, Dionysius was worshipped by women. He was a secret cult. The women would worship Dionysius or Bacchus if they were Roman, and they were called. It was called the secrets of Dionysius. In other words, they had some kind of like a female secret society that was attached to Dionysius. But it was all about. He was also not only the god of wine and stuff and parties. He was also the god of what? Fertility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Jason asked a question, Dennis. He said that are there any keys or signs when you're dealing with a demon, or is it just something you know?
Oh God, yeah, there are many. I list a lot of them in my book, Beyond the Shadows. There are many different signs, aversion to religious objects, names, complete change in personalities. Like if I'm kind of a vicious person, all of a sudden I turn into a party person, or do some things that are completely out of character. You have to wonder about that. Definitely, that's another sign. That's a major sign. It can also be a fixation on things, like liking reptiles way more than someone should, or becoming obsessed with things like that. It can also be a matter of controlling things. Weird paranormal stuff can happen around these people. There can be very many signs. I've had a lot of people ask me over the years, they'll read that book and they say, I got sign 3, 4, and 5. Does that mean I'm possessed? No, not necessarily. I said, you got to really, in my book, I would need for you to check most all of the boxes off. Okay.
Right.
I would say that you got a problem. But most of the time, if you're worried about being possessed, you're not possessed. Okay. That's the way that works. But I've had people ask me that, Dr. Carroll, can I be walking down the road and bam, I get possessed? No, it don't work that way. You got to, like we were talking about earlier, you got to open the door.
Yeah, you got to have some kind of spiritual opening.
Yeah, but you do that by doing certain ways. You can have addictions, like to pornography or gambling or drinking or drugs. All of these different type things can be doorways, spiritual doorways. But like we were talking about earlier, even indulging in certain types of music, movies, things like that. I have actually had a case once where I think that there was a demon attached to a video game. They can get into a lot of different areas and use those things against us.
Dennis, they make video games like that now. I ran across one the other day, And the way you play this game is there's a pentagram on the ground, and there's these little poles that stand around each point. And you're supposed to go in and do something with this, and then a demon tells you what hallway to go down.
That's really.
And I'm like, yeah.
That's all.
And I was like, oh my God.
You remember? You ever play Bloody Mary? That's a ritual. Bloody Mary is a ritual.
Yep.
We need to educate ourselves and understand that they're using and abusing us this way with these things. And this is exactly the way that demons can open that doorway and get into your life, whether you know it or not sometimes.
Yeah.
But they know that.
I've seen a lot of these video games that they're coming out with now for kids, grown kids. And I am not very impressed when I sit and really take a good look at these games. It's like, oh my God. I mean, they're bad. They're bad. And a normal teenager or gamer would just think, oh, it's just a game. And I'm like, no, do you know what you're following? So, yeah.
But you know, I knew a guy one time that was so obsessed with playing video games. His wife left him and took their baby with him because she was no longer part of his life. His whole life became the video game. That is possession, is it not? Is that not?
It is.
It
is.
So there are different types of possession that these things could use against you, especially like with addictions, like to pornography or gambling or whatever you're addicted, whatever they get you with. It can be stamp collecting, folks. Okay, I mean, whatever it takes to get to you, that's what they use.
Yeah.
As a weapon against you. And, you know, there have been many cases I've run into this guy. And like I say, I've met demons face to face. And I know how they operate. I know what they're. Yeah. Believe me, you do not want to really know what they really, really look like. Okay?
Right.
It would haunt you the rest of your life. But let me say this. They will do whatever it takes in you to use against you, especially fear and control.
Yeah.
And they can take they're so sensitive. They are supernaturally sensitive to the point where they can even almost read your mind. They can pick up on what scares you and what bothers you, what pushes your buttons and pulls your chain. They'll use it every time against you. They're insidious that way. That's what makes them so downright dangerous.
Yeah.
Because they know you better than you do. And that's the problem.
Yep.
That's what I've said about vampires. That's what makes the vampires so dangerous. They're just too darn much like us. And that's the way that goes, is it? And that's the worst kind of most dangerous monster of all, the one that's more like humans, you know.
Oh, well, Woo, I don't know where your question went, but that was a good one.
I'm sorry. My sound's kind of cutting out on me a little bit. Go ahead.
Woo had asked if it's true that if you could get a demon to speak its name, if it has any loss of power.
Yeah, but they're never going to tell you that. They're too smart for that.
Yeah, they'll lie to you.
Yeah, they will tell you a name, but it's not true. The demons lie. You can, I've had over the years, I've had people say, "Oh, I'm so worried about this. The demon said this to me, and now I'm worried it's going." I say, "Look, you can't believe anything they tell you. They're liars, and they're the manipulative liars." Okay. Yes. We've all known narcissistic people, right? Yeah. So they ain't a drop in the bucket to what a demon can do. Okay. Right. They ain't a drop in the bucket, but these guys, they're liars, and no matter what they do, they may put a little truth in there just to mislead you. You understand? Yeah. But it's all mostly a lie that they're trying to feed you. But if you could,
Dennis, I have to disagree. Because I know for a fact that demons, when you put them to the test and you use the name of Jesus, they have to tell you the truth, and But
you can.
You will learn more. Yes,
you can force them to do things. But what I'm saying is, they're not going to want to voluntarily give you their name.
Well, no, they're not going to voluntarily come out of somebody either. Yeah.
True.
You both make good points. Because I'm under the impression that these entities also go and use our paternal instincts. So, like what Dennis was saying earlier, cry out from the woods saying, "Help me, help me." They're
Well,
trying to lure you in, but if you
Yeah.
question them, like what Susie's saying, then they'll have to give you an answer, especially if you're invoking the name of Jesus
Take
Christ.
you can
authority
corner
over
them
'em,
and force
yes.
them into that, but you got to be very careful what you believe, okay? Because they will try to mislead you. They play mind games with you. See, that's where they get a psychological push on you that way, and you got to be very careful how you deal with them. The best thing to do is not to have a long conversation with them.
Oh yeah, no.
Either get rid of them, cast them out,
I think that the
and come
best thing
on
to
your
do is to
way.
know your authority in God. When you
You
know your
don't need
authority in
that's
God,
right. You don't need
you're not going to
to
take no crap from them.
you don't need to have long conversations with them because they will screw you up eventually. They can do it. You got to remember something about the demon. It is your worst enemy, no matter what. It is looking for your ultimate destruction.
True.
Yeah, no matter
True.
what.
True.
Well,
They
Dennis,
are
we
not
only
good.
got it. We only got a few minutes left. Do you want to tell everybody where to find you and your books and how to get your books? I've got one. I'm getting ready to order another one. Did you ever finish the one that you were writing? The last one?
Well, I'm still working on that one. It's going
Okay.
to probably be towards the end of the year before I get it done. But it's going to be called Paracryptidology, Hunting Monsters and
Yeah.
Things of Nightmare. Yeah, I'm trying to cram as much into that as possible. I've got another one I'm going to begin work on too. It's going to be called the Handbook of Supernatural Stuff. So I'm working on it, try to put more information in on it. I'm going to start work on it pretty soon. But I do have a couple of books out on Amazon now, which is one called Beyond the Shadows, a field guide to the paranormal. And the other one is called The Road Unseen, a paranormal journey into high strangeness. That's available on Barnes and Noble and Amazon. Just look up DennisWCarroll.com is my website. Also, I have 3 podcasts that I do on a regular basis. Monday nights at 9:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I do The Road Less Traveled with my friend Gerald Fountain. We cover some of the offbeat stuff there that other people don't do, much as we can. Had a great show the other night. We did one on the haunted hotels and restaurants, so that was really yeah. So and then Wednesday nights I have, of course, Hunting the Shadows at 9:00 p.m. Eastern Time as well. I'm always 9:00 p.m. Okay,
Right.
Eastern Time, and Friday nights I have Paranormal Point of View. That's where I do book reviews and movie reviews, stuff like that, and with a paranormal kind of slant to it. I also do a show with Miss Chantel Mayberg almost every week on Aquarius Rising. Matter of fact, we got one coming up this Thursday, and that's at 1:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
How's
on Thursday.
Chantel doing?
Yeah. And then I do other podcasts like this too as well, so I keep busy.
All right. Well, I do thank you for coming on again. I enjoy when you come on.
It's always a pleasure to get together with all you guys. It's real fun.
Yeah. And I have been off doing other things, so I'm done doing those other things. So now I'm going to get back into pushing this one more, this show more, and trying to get into doing more shows. I've got Sherry to help and Steve, and when Susie can't be here, Susie's been going and doing what is it?
Chasing
Sorting
cows. Yeah,
chasing cows.
Chasing cows.
So she's been doing a lot of that in competitions, and so on the weekends sometimes she's usually gone. So but I'm gonna try to get up and get some more during the week. So yeah. And I have been fighting a cold for 2 days, and I think it's trying to get me. I really do. I have been running nose, watering eyes.
I think you
and I
got too
thought
much
it was
mold
just,
in that apartment. I think
You know
you just got
what?
mold.
I
Yeah.
think that you're correct from all of the leaking that has been happening every time it rains. And 3 years they've been refusing to fix it. But I mean, it's starting to really affect me. So
A lot of
I
that, a lot of that stuff is weather related. I think it does me. It gets my sinuses too, especially.
I don't go out. I stay
When
in
you
my
get
house.
out, you
I
get
haven't
better.
left
And
my
when you
house
get
in a month.
when you get out of your
Well,
house, Brenda, you get better.
I think like
No,
it's
not
me.
around here.
You go from a air conditioning and you go outside everybody can, that's what gets me, I think.
Yeah, I have a water treatment plant behind me, and the fumes that come off of that in the air is so bad. And the other night, we went to take Tucker outside, and you couldn't even, there was no clouds in the skies, but you could barely see anything because the haze that just sat over us was horrible. And it smelled outside like chemicals. So yeah, no, I do not. I hate living in the city. I cannot stand it. It's noisy. People around me are rude. I mean, real bad rude, and it's horrible here. So I don't even go out anymore. I didn't even. Normally, I go to my doctor's appointments, and then I go to the grocery store once a month. I didn't even do that this month. I was like, nope. Nope. Don't want to even deal with the outside. And I mean, I don't know what's going on with the people around here in this city.
A lot of these businesses, Brenda, they use chemicals on their lawns and all that stuff too. And I think we get a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
That's the air pollution anyway, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, I thought I left all that behind. When I left California, it was gray out there all the time from the smog and the pollution. Okay. And I went back. It's been about 6 years now, because it was just before I lost my leg. I went back to California to go visit family. And it was so bad. I was coming out of Arizona and going into California, and I could see nothing but black everywhere. And it was like, why am I here? I should make these people come visit me so they know what they're missing, because it was so bad. But I do not trust our quality of air anymore, especially around the cities. And I don't know. And I live right next to Fort Hood, and I am here to tell you, I don't know what's coming up off of it, but I ain't liking it. So, but it's just so bad.
Somebody told me the other day, and I noticed this, mentioned it the other day. A lot of these chemtrails that they've been doing, they stopped that for a while, but now somebody said they've started back again on them. So that could be somebody. Yeah.
Well, they said
they're going into weather manipulation or something.
Yeah. And they're finding a lot of fine plastic and fine aluminum that are in those they say they're cloud seeding, where they make it rain. But scientists, and I've been watching, because I've been looking at a lot of different things, and they have been finding small particles of plastic, aluminum, when they're doing this, and they're so fine, we're breathing this.
Oh, yeah. I heard that the other day that they were doing some autopsies. They were talking about different autopsies, and they were finding so much plastic in human lungs. And they said that it's like, I think like only 2 out of 10 people didn't have it. Yep. So we are breathing plastic. And guess where most of it's coming from? Water bottles.
Oh. Well, yeah. I thought they're supposed to be recycling those things to use them for more water bottles. But no, I think they're recycling them to put in the cloud seeding.
We're getting a lot of the particles when we drink the water.
Oh, God, don't tell me that, because I can't drink sink water. All I've got is bottled water.
Just pray over everything you put into your body.
That's right. God help this, it's going down.
Yeah, but you know what? If they would put the water in real glass bottles,
yes,
recycle that better than plastic.
Yeah. And I remember when they used to do sodas in bottles,
Yeah.
but it was healthier for us to drink it that way. So, of course, they stopped doing it.
When I was a kid, we used to collect soda bottles. You get too much back on them,
Yeah, me too. You collect all your bottles.
Comic books.
Yeah, it even said on it 15 cents when you go to give it back. They sell it for 15 cents.
We called it deposit. Yeah.
Yeah. Susie, stop playing on your phone. I'm hearing all kinds of stuff coming out of you.
Oh no.
Yeah. But anyways, Dennis, thank you again for coming. And I've got to get back into your shows, Abe's shows, and sit my behind down and start doing better things.
There you
Good,
Yeah.
very good. Yeah.
Yeah, Steve. But all right, guys, Susie, I swear.
I didn't do it.
But anyways, so we are going to go ahead and get out of here, guys. I hope that you enjoyed the show as much as we enjoyed Dennis. And I know you all do because most of you watch his show. So that's a good thing. But everybody have a good rest of the weekend. Take care, be safe. And like always, everybody, please be kind to one another and have a good night.
Good night.